Welcome to the Working World. I'm Jamie Lingham.
And I'm Keryn Mendez. Our next guest's HR and mobility journey spans over 20 years at leading tech organizations, first at Intel and currently at Hewlett Packard Enterprises. Kerwin Guillermo is a fresh voice and a generous contributor as a positive influence in HR and mobility circles. Always focused on and demonstrating leadership through change, he is identifying in the midst of challenges, exceptional and unique partnerships, guiding team members to their best performances and experiences, and helping others find their success in a range of environments.
Kerwin's work has given him the opportunity to lead through a range of corporate and organisational and business transitions that includes mergers and acquisitions, spin-offs, startups, site closures, and global crises, obviously like we're going through with COVID-19. He's earned a reputation for developing significant relationships, delivering point-of-need education, and executing innovation at a pace faster than the market. He's also adept at discovering new approaches and solutions for attracting, hiring, deploying, engaging, and most importantly, retaining talent.
He was a board of director from 2018 to 2020, a chairman-elect for 2024 Worldwide ERC, Employee Relocation Council, and has a huge desire to give back to the industry that he loves so much. I know that Kerwin has been in huge demand this year, and we'd like to welcome him to the working world. We are going to now talk through his recently published Talent Mobility, The Next Normal publication. And over to you, Kerwin. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. Hi.
So Kerwin, how's it all been for you? I know you've been on a number of shows. Your opinion's been sought after by many people in the industry. Obviously, you're one of the thought leaders. How's it been for you? How's your COVID experience been, or as we like to call it, the Corona coaster?
Well, it's again, I try to find the silver lining in everything that we're going through. Past, present, it's more difficult to find the silver lining in everything else that's going on right now. But the part that's been most encouraging for me is really the generosity of spirit within our mobility community. I've reached out to, again, first couple of months of COVID, I know I reached out to retired mobility leaders, HR leaders, to start learning from what they experienced in past downturns, challenges, try to find inspiration of stuff that we can actually try to extrapolate for the present. And that has been the most encouraging for me, the generosity of the spirit.
Kerwin, would you be able to take me through, I guess, your view of the impact of COVID-19 on talent mobility more generally, and what your longer term predictions are around in this space?
Well, if I can go through a little bit of what was happening before COVID and how COVID accelerated all of that or changed the trajectory. I'll start with the era of protectionism within the immigration space. We have seen that before COVID with a lot of the changing rules in immigration, whether it's in the US or elsewhere, Brexit, etc. We've seen that, and I expect that to only be elevated post-COVID. Unemployment numbers will go down. Countries will protect their own. That's the clamor of the popular sentiment within the country. So I think that's one. The movement of talent will be harder and slower. It will be harder for foreign nationals to come in and stay in country. That's number one. Number two, countries competing for revenue. We've seen that before COVID, whether it's the US-China trade war, or you've seen in within the EU space, countries who were trying to charge, tech companies for revenue, your Google, your Facebook, etc. Within EU, they're competing for the same revenue. You've seen that as well with some of the posted worker directive changes prior to COVID. I expect a lot of those to again ramp up and be more elevated, be more aggressive post-COVID. The other part that we've seen pre-COVID is really all about this push on more remote work. We've seen that in the past. Nothing is new. It's just the magnitude and scale of all of these that's going on that's ramped it up, for companies to survive, for people to continue to do work. So those three for me are the biggest movers. in terms of variables that we're going through right now and will continue to go through, post-COVID.
Sure.
So I think that, as you were saying, that countries are getting, there's a lot more protectionism going on. But the reality is that individuals still have the control is if they want to move, or do you think that, we're going to see more of that? We're going to see individuals pushing their own agendas as opposed to companies and governments, driving the mobility space?
I think it's multiple factors. I totally see the future where individuals will continue to pursue their own agenda. And that's core to what talent mobility is. That's core to all of our stories. That's personal for me. That's what happened in my family. My parents are Chinese nationals, grandparents. They migrated over to Manila. I grew up in Manila, moved over to Singapore out of, again, based on work opportunities. And, work opportunities allowed me access to this current role. I expect individuals to keep pursuing that because that's how we are as a people, as a society. We want to go for better career, life, everything else. So that will continue to happen regardless of how a lot of work can be done remotely. When you look at different industries, whether tech, oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, etc. So people will still have that opportunity and it will still be relevant as we move forward. I think the other thing that countries and corporates would realize later on is for as long as we operate within a connected global economy, trade and investments flow country to country. We've seen in the last couple of weeks the biggest trade deal that across Asia, major partners, South Pacific, came into over 20 countries, the biggest deal in history, without the involvement of US actually came into play. I think all of those will allow and foster movement of talent. They should make it easier. Trade leads and then talent movement follows. It is difficult for countries to entice foreign investments into their country if they handicap corporates in bringing in foreign talent, especially if you look at some of the recent events. In the past 2 weeks as well, Singapore announced a new visa type for top tech talents because they thought that innovation via tech will be the pathway towards, a way out of COVID. We've seen that as well out of Canada when they are revisiting their perm residency rules, their point system. So countries who have figured out a way to leverage the flow of talent as a lagging indicator, as a lagging variable to trade and investment, we'll be able to open up channels and we will still continue to see talent flow through different countries.
And that certainly seems like the new battleground because Australia has done the same thing. We've got, we have a global talent visa, and that's looking at ag tech, fintech, cybersecurity, a range of other things. So it really feels like that's where the competition's moving. I know the Australian program has got a pathway to permanent residency. It was a program initially started last year for 5,000 places. In the recent federal budget, it was announced there's 15,000 places. So this really feels like the sort of area that a lot of countries, and it's easy to get those two confused, countries are competing for talent.
Totally. And we've seen that as well. And I expect a lot more conversations to ramp up in the space of Brexit. EU, because of Brexit, they would have to renegotiate a lot of these. And it's on the table right now. Week after week, we've seen movement in that space, which is good because they have to renegotiate their trade deals with the different countries now that UK would stand on its own. And then the immigration conversations would follow. Specific to that, I know there's a meeting that I'm preparing to attend. I think it's December 10th, where the government is actually trying to listen to more corporate, the voice of the corporate in terms of what we're doing, the business that we're bringing, and how we could be partners in nation building as well. So I expect a lot more governments to be open in conversations like that.
You mentioned protectionism earlier, and obviously we spoke a little bit then around the visa and the immigration side of protectionism when it comes to countries' focus. Are you seeing protectionism in any other respects of legislation? Obviously, a lot of legislation right now is racing to keep up with the changes that COVID's brought about, but are you seeing changes in any other parts of legislation? So be that tax, corporate or individual tax, for example, in any other countries across what Hewlett Packard are based?
In the recent past, we've been, even prior to COVID, and I expect everything to be ramped up, a lot more intense scrutiny in terms of the short-term business visitor program within the UK. That has ramped up a lot over the recent years in terms of audits, enforcement. Posted worker directive is an area that is evolving rather fast. During the period of COVID, there's been additional regulations that were announced. Again, PWD started from the agriculture side within EU, and then now it's making its ways through more regulations and enforcement into all other parts of corporate. And I expect that to happen with, again, trying to balance the flow of cheaper labor, equal pay, equal work type approach. So EU definitely, US most definitely. Countries will have to figure out how to recoup all of these handouts and bailout money that they've spent. They've dug deep into their reserves, and they have to figure out how to recover a lot of those investment and enforcement of existing rules, toughening up existing rules. Is the easiest path for countries to go about all of these.
Which is the Philippine Overseas Employment Agency, that has to give permission to foreign nationals, for local citizens to work overseas. And obviously that's a way of, as you say, to recoup money spent, and to also ensure that there's a revenue coming from people leaving the country. Do you envisage that could happen in other countries around the world? I've just been trying to think how governments are actually going to regulate and how they're going to actually recoup money. Do you think that sort of system may move forward for other countries?
I expect that to happen. Countries to be creative in terms of how do I get a share of that pie if we are losing talent, brain drain, whatever. Again, POEA started at a time when traditionally Philippines was sending a lot of labor to Middle East, oil and gas, domestic worker, healthcare workers. It started within that regime, and then they put in place insurance coverages for foreign workers additional aid and help, so they can again help in nation building back home. I expect more countries to do that, just because again find an easy way to recoup some of the spending that they've been through in this past few months.
So necessity is the mother of all innovation, and COVID has been a great driver of helping people think differently. And obviously, as you've touched on, there was a number of projects you've worked on where you can't put boots on the ground, as Keryn says. So do you think a lot of the initiatives that you've undertaken, and I suppose developments in across the globe, do you think they will stick? Do you think there'll be, if you look at mining, there's remote train driving, there's remote truck driving, there's all these different things that can be done remotely. Do you think there'll be a whole subsection of jobs that won't be, that were there pre-COVID that may not be there post-COVID?
We would see that definitely a lot of shifts. And we are seeing that right now as we're moving. So depending on the industry, some industries were able to thrive during the period of COVID, and they will continue to thrive, or maybe that pickup would slow down afterwards, right? Everything logistics picked up. Right? And everything retail, they were hurting before COVID. We've seen a lot of malls shut down, reduced footprint. Pre-COVID, it accelerated, and that will continue to diminish. So we will continue to see a lot of those trends from before to right now. What I want to focus on, and what I encourage my stakeholders to focus on are, with all of these shifts, what are those new needs, new solutions that did not exist before, that were not as relevant before, that we need to focus on? A few things. Number one, from an engagement perspective, it will change. People crave a lot of FaceTime right now. Too much distance, too much isolation will hurt wellness, mental health, well-being. How do we continue to foster the culture of innovation, the culture of collaboration in a very different setup? So we need to be ahead of that. At some point, there will be a fatigue of all of these, virtual stuff, and we'd have to figure out, how do we perceive office work? In the past, that's where you go, you get things done. In the future, I'd like to think that it will be more a space where we focus a lot more on collaboration. And how do we dial that up? We have to focus on new things. If I bring this back a little bit to mobility, one campaign that I knew I wanted to do very early on was, because the jobs I've taken in the past, talent acquisition, I did shared services before, and then mobility. I knew during bad times, my track record in the past, they were hurt right away during bad times, right? They're headcount driven, scale driven. So any signal of downturn, headcount cuts. So early on within the time of COVID, I started conversations to figure out, how can we pull together business cases where we can actually project that mobility can be an instrument that helps companies reduce costs, save jobs. And we were able to do a little bit of that within the period of COVID. Specific examples. At the time when a lot of people are losing jobs, not a lot of jobs available in the market, if I ask an employee, would you move to a lower cost location to preserve jobs, or take the risk of layoff? I'd like to think a lot of people would take the lower cost location job, and then hopefully at some point move to someplace else. So we've sold a lot of that business case, and I think it will continue to make sense. But again, so those are business case examples. But at the highest level, for me, the conversation within mobility has to change from cost to investment. And we have to confront HR and the managers all the time, whether attract, retain, develop, or motivate talent. It's all a function of what investments am I willing to make, where will I invest, how will I invest, instead of just looking at cost, which is a one-dimension metric.
So, I mean, I think when COVID hit, everyone thought it was going to be a 2020 proposition. The reality is, it looks like the new normal will continue well into 2021, and who knows if that's going to be beyond. And therefore, wellness and employee well-being is going to still be, sort of front of mind. As you said, there's a number of issues with the technology we're using. I know there's Zoom fatigue. I know there's lots of different effects on employees through remote working. What would you say the top three things that you've either HP have done for your award, and congratulations on that, by the way? So what are the top three things that you've done, or what are the top three trends that you have seen in the industry that companies can implement over the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months?
A few things that will be different. Number one, I expect more human-centric, actually. More human-centric mobility, more human-centric in terms of how we do HR, more human-centric in terms of how companies relate to, what they protected right away when COVID set in. They tried to protect their customers, they tried to protect cash flow, and they tried to protect their team members. I think all of that will continue to matter, and all of that will be more human-centric. People will put a lot more value to that. The companies who did not, I've seen a lot of examples. For example, within HPE, within the first 2 months, by May, we extended the facility of about $2 billion to support our customers. So they would not be able, so we could extend terms, we could support customers, because they would be in trouble if they don't receive support from for our clients from their suppliers. So we have to do that. We have extended support for the employees. So that will continue to be important, human-centric. Number two, the focus on digital as it relates to resiliency. The companies who have the technology, digital muscle, are able to get through a lot of these, whether it's just simple things like figuring out how many people do you have, where are they, duty of care, simple stuff. You need technology, you need digital. Reaching out to people, to your examples, whether it's Zoom or other means to be able to engage them. That's something we are continuing to invest. We were starting that already prior COVID from an engagement perspective, from mobility, for example. We have developed over 40 to 60 titles, content. Imagine this like a Netflix or a YouTube channel I have in mobility that talks about the why of mobility, the technical aspects, the soft stuff, conversations you need to have with your manager, etc. And now we are continuing forward with that 40 to 60 topics, original and curated. And then we will use digital to figure out and analytics what you are going through. If you posted the requisition in a country, in a location like Canberra, and I know it took us over 90 to 120 days to fill the requisition for that job level certification requirement, then I will push content to a manager that says, let's have a conversation because you may want to open up hiring across borders. Or content that goes to an employee that talks about what they're going through, what they're about to go through, whether it's the cloud of fear and worry because of immigration, that type of conversation. If we know they're about to expire, work permits about to expire, they're about to start something else. So that will continue to happen, technology, digital investment. And then for me, the third part, something that was always there, I'd like to think is always there, that will, I'd like to continue to be relevant, is the expectation of accountability across all of us. It's a pet peeve of mine when I see mobility programs, mobility leaders attending mobility conferences where people sort of sit there and think like HR and the business should be coming over to them if they need help. I think accountability is understanding the why of mobility, understanding what we do matters, and reaching out, putting the customer at the center, reaching out, understanding, raising our business acumen to understand what will help and what will harm our customers, the employees that we move, the why of mobility for the business, and being part of that conversation. I think that we've been through a period where people have translated a lot of those into more like entitlement. I think it has to be about accountability first.
Yeah, that accountability point is really interesting because I've had a lot of conversations with our industry colleagues around a lot of business leaders being quite reluctant to take on the accountability, especially when it comes to risk. So obviously we're in a whole new territory when it comes to health and safety and foreign legislation. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of legislations across the globe are still racing to keep up with the change. So I guess what would you recommend to mobility practitioners that are watching this around how they can help managers navigate that and assign that accountability around determining risk, whether it be from a health and safety point of view or whether it be around understanding the employer obligations in an unknown environment? What would you say to mobility practitioners to help them guide their business leaders around taking accountability for that risk and making the decision around whether to send somebody or not?
I'll raise a few examples in terms of how people reacted and why I think that was wrong. Immediately after COVID hit, and it hit Asia first, you've seen a lot of mobility programs scramble to bring people home. And I thought that's odd, that's wrong. It's like you don't react, you don't focus like that. So we started looking at our demographics, we started looking at everything else. And then we run into situations where we have actually people in New Zealand from the US. There were 6 or 12 of them. And then we started to have conversations, engagement first with them to listen and made them aware of all of the facts. And the decision was stay in New Zealand. It's safer in New Zealand than to go back to the US East Coast at the time. And they continue to be there. So once we have all of these data, all of these information, engagement with the employee, we went back to the business to have those conversations with the business. Again, your first impulse would be, again, because that's probably how we grew up, When something is not safe, go home. But at the time of COVID, everywhere is not safe. You just have to figure out, which place is safer, less, more than others. And that's probably how we need to make our decisions. So because of that, we applied the same approach to. We have people from India stuck in Canada, so maybe for them, stay in Canada, then go back to India. And then we've had a lot of other people because of the protectionism, border closure, executive orders within the US that were announced and put in effect within 24 to 48 hours that, stranded people outside. We started telling people, let's evaluate this, let's not react. So for me, it's about a few things because of those examples. Engagement with your leadership, engagement with HR. I always tell a lot of the people, and that's probably how I grew up, whether at Intel or at HP. We have a clear understanding of who our customer is. It's the business, it's the employee. And then we have a good understanding that we share custody of the same customer with other parts of HR, with other parts of the support functions, whether it's finance, procurement, etc. So when I think of something that my customer is going through, I have to engage with other partners. I have to bring the voice of the employee, voice of the customer, voice of what's going on in the market. Number one. Number two, it's a never-ending pursuit to keep raising our business acumen. What we do, what we're going through industry, we have a lot of experts. We're surrounded with our providers, a roster of providers, a broader roster, beyond that, that offer a lot of thought leadership. So consuming a lot of that information that will be purposeful. When I have information like that, think about how it would impact us, what decisions do I need to make, etc., and then keep applying that to your business. And number three, most important, I encourage the people within our community is, as you consume all of these knowledge, intelligence, and apply that, whether you learn from it, it was success, or you failed, you learned something from it, keep sharing back within our community. And that's where sessions like this are helpful. Other conferences are helpful because we have to keep doing that.
It's funny. I know that in a lot of the talks you've given and interviews you've done, you like the Simon Sinek of mobility, in that you focus a lot on your why, and it seems to be an ongoing theme in everything that you do. Just for the mobility practitioners out there, can you just explain how they would strip things back to their why and use that moving forward with their mobility programs?
Thank you. This brings me back to 2015. I didn't have the job. I came across the book, and then I started going through that exercise as part of my audition for the job.
Yep.
And we started looking at, why are we sending people out? And then keep asking that question over and over, why, with every move. And then that gives you really the strategy. There's a lot of mobility leaders who just focuses on the business of mobility. And for them, the business was, logistics, coordination, moving people from A to B. But once you start to understand, I move people because I'm attracting talent, I'm hiring talent university to where we are, then the approach and the investment and the conversations become very different. Once you understand that you're moving talent to generate revenue, then how you do, again, a lot of people talk about core flex, different ways of doing mobility. They do it based it's easy to design all of those when you put mobility at the center, but once you put the customer at the center, then I have to be mindful of affordability. That every move is not created equal. The profit margin for every move is different. There are commitments I need to make. If I start thinking about between 2016 to right now, we've had 17 M&As. And every M&A would have a different component of mobility, whether it's foreign talent that we have to absorb or people that they're sending around the world. I need to understand their why of mobility. Then I can start engaging those talents better. Because if I fail to do that and I just focus on integration, transfer of a sponsorship and work permit, then I'm making myself vulnerable of losing those talent. I've seen bad examples in our past. where we have failed to understand the why and just assume that what we do will apply, there's a lot of risk in doing that.
Yeah.
And retaining talent will continue to be one of the biggest challenges, I think, that you've quite rightly pointed out already for a lot of organisations. But outside of that, when organisations are looking at expanding their virtual or remote workforces moving forward, what do you think the biggest challenge will be for them?
I like the focus on defense and offense, and I tend to have more fun with offense. Defense is natural for everybody else. So specific examples in retaining talent. Again, I spent a lot more years in talent acquisition. Mobility was a small 25%, 20% of my job at the time in Asia. And our focus was, how do I poach experienced talent from our competitors? Mm-hmm. And then you try to compete based on job offer. When I go about current events, when I read about Dell acquiring EMC, I knew I had to go after those talent because they are vulnerable anytime there's news like that. When Samsung was peaking, when Acer was having trouble with quality issues, I knew I had to go after those talent. But now with mobility, looking at mobility as my core portfolio, I have to partner more with others and figure out what was I doing as TA, because those are the same playbook that my competitors are probably using. So what can I do to protect my talent from a retention perspective? Then we started doing incentives in mobility. So for example, because I would go after foreign talent that has been through a mobility program, they were repatriating from my competitors and will try to poach them, because people who are repatriating, they're more vulnerable. They don't know what their role is. They're probably going back to the same job that's not enough incentive for them. They want better pay, more promo. I went through an assignment. You must reward me. Then you poach them. They sign with you faster. So what I'm doing now with incentives is when we send people out to an assignment, if it's a two-way, as part of cost projection, the first conversation before cost projection has to be, what's your goal? And then want the why of the move, right? Once the goal is defined, we offer to the manager, if you switch on incentives, then you put a bucket of money. When they hit their goals, you pay them more money. When they come home earlier than scheduled and hit their objectives, you pay them even more money. Then it becomes harder to poach talent from us while they're on assignment, because the company poaching the talent will have to pay more from a sign-on bonus perspective, which becomes a deterrent. Or when I send talent one-way transfer, a lot of companies are not doing traditional anymore. They're doing one-way transfer. And those talent, they've been taken care of. They have received investment, and they are vulnerable because of how well maybe they're integrating to the new country, to the new jobs, the new team. So what we're doing is, when we send somebody one-way transfer, again, goals, 12 months after, what would you have achieved? And if you're still an active employee at that point, you can get as much as about 3 months extra pay. That's part of your move. Then it becomes harder to poach those talent. And that's how I would use mobility as a way to retain talent. Again, there's many other ways we've explored. One area that I know I wasn't as successful in is using the investments that we're making for perm residency. This was a lot more successful in Australia, not much in the US, where, again, there's a lot of things we can do as part of the performance review cycle. You have your annual conversations, performance review, and then there's a time of the year where you deliver your merit increases and variable bonuses. My simple ask was to include the investment that they're making on perm residency as part of that conversation. You may not get everything you ask for. This is a year when you will not get everything you want, you expect from a pay and bonus perspective, but we can still give you our sponsorship for perm residency, and not all sponsorships are created equal. And with our track record of success, that probably expresses our intent to retain more than money we don't have right now.
And it probably means more to the employee than money at that point in time as well.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I love the sayings. Not all moves are created equal. I totally agree with you. Using pathways to permanent residency, looking at non-monetary benefits that are going to drive a move and drive retention. Now, Kerwin, you've touched on so many things in this session. It's been absolutely enlightening. I suppose if you want people in the audience to take away 3 things, what do you think they'd be? They're just 3 things that they'd walk away from this session and that would really resonate, that they could work with over the next 12 months. What would they be?
In their role, make an impact. Figure out the why, make an impact. That's easy for everybody. That's the basic expectation in your job. Number 2, build a legacy. And my message for everybody is you don't build a legacy by carrying on someone else's. They have to figure out, blaze their own trail, encourage others to take risk, encourage others to try out new ways of doing things. And as they are successful, they have to keep sharing that inspiration with others. And number 3, be a force for good. It happened very, very late in my career. I feel bad, but I have a realization that in all of our roles, we are in positions where we could do good for our community, for whatever advocacy you have. Specific examples, I've started to put in to my supply chain an organization called Move for Hunger. So every family we move in the US, we make a donation. Whatever perishables they have goes to a food bank. And then I've started to involve an organization that does discard and donate. So we send a professional organizer, your Marie Kondo type person, and then they identify things and don't move that. The furniture is too big for Hong Kong, and then we donate that to local shelters on behalf of the employee, and they get at the time when they can still get tax credits. And then at the end of the day, we save cost as well in terms of moving, big volume furnitures, or prioritize. What we've done as well for me is women-led, women-owned small businesses into our supply chain. So we've put a lot more premium for that. Again, doing good is part of, for me, the prescription in as we are blessed with opportunities that we have every day. And this is a week where we celebrate a lot of being thankful for. This is a year where we really just have to be grateful for all that we have and all that we can do.
That's really inspiring, Kerwin. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So thank you for your time today. As James said, that was really enlightening. We've covered a whole range of topics there, but we really appreciate your time today and delving into some of those which we can. We wish we could talk a little bit longer, but we want to give time back to people and let them get on with doing good. So thank you for your time today, and we'll chat again soon. Take care.
And very grateful for the opportunity. Thank you for the privilege of this.
And Kerwin, I'm sure that given your passion and enthusiasm for the industry, we'll definitely love to welcome you back to the working world. And let's see where we are in 6 months or 12 months. And it'd be just fascinating to see what's changed and what we can look forward to, for the next 12, 24 months.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kerwin. Stay safe.
Bye.